Welcome to the Dr. Joe Show. I'm Joe, and today I am very happy, I'm very proud to have put together what I think is another great episode. There were several requests to cover this brand, and I did my best to put together my version through what I know and through what I could find and through some knowledge, books I read, things like that, to put together a concise and detailed brand history of the company we're getting in today. Personally, to me, it's one of the better stories when it comes to cigar companies and where they come from and where they are and how they got there. It's actually a very moving story. It's really a great, an epic, really, an epic. When you look at cigar brands and cigar history, this story is almost a legend already. It pretty much is. I don't know how else to put it. I speak of Fuente. The brand Fuente currently is one of the most popular brands in the world, Cuban cigars included. It's one of the most successful brands in the world. And contrary to popular belief, it wasn't always that way, you know. I got a great episode lined up. We got a really intense, detailed brand history to get into, so I don't want to take up too much time here. What I do want to do is introduce the cigar that we're going to be reviewing as we do this episode, and that cigar is the Opus X. I feel that when you talk about Fuente and you're going to get into the brand history like I'm about to, there really is no better cigar to smoke to represent the success of the brand. Not that it's the best cigar in the world, you know, please don't get me wrong. I understand there are a lot of mixed feelings out there about this cigar, but I'm going to get into some of that later too. Whatever you think about the cigar, however you feel about it, you cannot deny the fact that it's pretty much already legendary. And it is one of the most sought-after cigars in the world, Cuban cigars included. And if you think it's tough to get here in the United States, you should try getting it somewhere else. It's probably easier to get Cuban cigars here than it is to get an Opus X overseas. I just thought of a little interesting fact right there. 95% of all Fuente-produced cigars stay within the United States. You know, and one of the smallest yearly releases they do is the Opus X, so that tells you right there how difficult it is to get, which is another reason people hate it, but like I said, we'll get into that later. The Vitola I've chosen because even though this line is one of the rarest in the brand inventory, as far as all the lines, sub-brands in the brand, the lines in the brand go, there are more Vitolas in it, sizes, shapes, than just about any other line I can think of. It might have the most shapes of any one brand in the world. Currently, I've counted, well, you know what, we'll get into that later too. The Vitola I've chosen is the Perfecxion X. The reason I chose this Vitola is, among all of those that are included in this brand, when the cigars do come around, it is one of the cigars that is most often a part of the retailer's standard line as far as when they're sent cigars. We'll talk a little more later also about, you know, how these things are distributed, how retailers get them, all sorts of stuff into why they're so rare and why they're so hard to get. But the Perfecxion X is, you know, usually whenever a retailer gets a batch of Opus, it's one of the shapes that most often come into play. So therefore, even though the cigar is hard to get, when you can get it, this is something you might be able to acquire. I don't want to do, you know, sit here and smoke a shape, you know, like a like a fucking BBMF or something that most people will not be able to get their hands on. These things come, of course, in boxes, which are pretty much impossible. It's pretty much impossible to get a box of Opus X unless you order it online or unless you have connections with a store, retailer, etc. But these things do come in tins of 3, which I like. and I picked these up back when I worked at the cigar shop. I would never buy these now because you do pay a premium on the tin, which is about somewhere between 10 and 15 bucks extra just for the fucking tin. So it's definitely not, but you can get them as singles, whatnot, and it's a good size cigar. That's another reason. I was gonna do a double Corona. The brand history is so fucking deep, and there's so much. First of all, after I wrote it, I realized, you know what? I can't do it this way. I have to turn it into more of a timeline format, which I did, because otherwise I would be there going back and forth forever. So that's A. B, I needed a cigar. I didn't want what happened in last episode to happen in this episode. We had the short El Rey del Mundo, which was, 4.3 inches, and on top of that, it was burning like fucking wildfire. So these, in general, usually burn pretty slow, as far as from my experience. And well, let's see how it is. I'm not going to say anything about how they are. Let's see how it is, and we will go downstairs and start smoking and get into the brand history. Just to cover it, this is a 6 1/4 inch by 48 ring gauge cigar, and pretty much the double Corona would have given me about an extra 1.5 inches or so. The double Corona is a 49 ring gauge by 7 5/8, I believe. So it's almost an 8-inch cigar. Would have given me then a good 1.5 inches extra, and a tiny, 1/64 of an inch ring gauge bigger. But I think this will suffice. I think this will suffice because other than the brand history, there is a little viewer email, but not too much. And then at the end of the episode, we're going to do something a little special. We'll play a little game of, show and tell, and top it off like that. So without further ado, I present to you the Opus X Perfecxion X. So here we are with our Opus X Perfecxion X. Just wanted to show you real quick. Took it out of the cellophane. This particular Opus X is from a 2011 batch, which, it does seem to make a difference with these cigars. You hear a lot of stuff out there that, oh, this Opus batch is pretty good. Oh, this Opus batch is terrible. This Opus batch is stellar. A whole bunch of different things. And I have experienced this myself. But the truth of the matter is not that the blend is different, inconsistent, and changes so much time to time. The real difference is how much time the tobacco was given to, ferment, air out, get rid of all the ammonias, stuff like that. What you're tasting for the most part is not, oh, this Opus has been blended poorly compared to the last year's. What you're tasting is this Opus is much younger than last year's. It's just a lot more ammonia, a lot more harshness. So one thing personally for me is I have a bunch of different batches of Opus X that I keep separated by year, so I know how old they are, how many years they've been given. This is a cigar that really does change with aging, I will tell you that. It's a complex cigar, and it really does change over time. For the most part, it gets better, flavors get richer, all the harshness and ammonia and all sorts of things that you don't want really do disappear. Cigars in cedar sheaths will age differently than cigars not in cedar sheaths. You'll see that this here is, 3 years old, and the cellophane really doesn't have a lot of yellowing to it. And other cigars I have from the same year, the cellophane does have a lot of yellowing. The tannins have been trapped, a lot of them, by the cedar
Anyway,
aging
sheath
is a whole other thing that we're going to get into at another time. But Opus X cigars really do benefit from that. So if you ever buy a bunch of Opus X cigars and you find they're really not to your liking, but usually they are, my advice, put them to the side and sit on them for a while, because they will get better. And there we go. We remove the cedar sheath, and very nice looking cigar. Nice oils, nice color, nice consistent shade. One thing about cedar sheaths that I don't like a lot of the time, the cigar wrapper will dry up a little. The oils will get soaked into the cedar. In this case, there have been enough oils to keep it going. Very nice foot on that cigar, very nice roll. You can see those channels going down there. Opus X cigars are according to Fuente, rolled in the entubado style. So we'll talk about how that came to be. But you could see the foot of that very much in a lot of ways, looks very much in a lot of ways like a Cuban cigar. Alright, so here we are, ready to smoke away on our Fuente Opus X Perfecxion X. Before I start, I just want to say very quickly, I know right away people are going, another Opus review, come on. They really are a dime a dozen. It's probably one of the most reviewed cigars on the internet. What I can promise you is that this is not just another Opus review. And if you look at comments coming up lately from my viewers, I do have a small but loyal and growing core. They will tell you that these aren't just cigar reviews. At the same time, while there is a lot of other information, we do incorporate a very good, fair cigar review into all that other information. And when I say a good, fair review, I say that because while there are a lot of dime a dozen Opus X reviews out on the internet, a lot of them are, lacking for exclusion of an uglier term. Some are just downright awful, okay? And others really can be biased, which is something that happens often when you have a cigar with as much hype and popularity behind it as the Opus X does. You get a lot of different types of people reviewing the cigar. The way I look at it is that there are three types of people reviewing Opus X cigars, or all cigars for that matter. One, you have your noob, your day one beginner, somebody who's new at smoking cigars, under 3 years or less, which means the Opus X to them is probably still like the core of their collection, the gem in their humidor. And hey, that's a great place to be. Nothing wrong with that. I was there at one point. Everybody is. But should you really be reviewing the fucking thing, in that point? Probably not. Especially because of that, you're going to be like one of those people who gives it a 10 out of 10 for reasons that when you read the review, a person who's been smoking cigars for years and years and years says, well, why is it getting a 10 out of 10? I don't see anything here that separates it from so many other cigars. So you're biased in the sense that you got your hands on a cigar that's like legendary. It's not really that hard to get your hands on, especially with the internet. Second type of person is the complete opposite. And sometimes a person of the mindset I'm going into now doesn't even realize that they think like this. It's almost a subconscious fear or desire not to conform to the status quo, not to be. It's like the type of person you meet who everybody else thinks it's a great movie and they're like, I didn't see anything so great about that. Everybody else thinks it's a great restaurant. It's overrated. Everybody else thinks it's a fucking great whatever it is. Everybody looks at something and says, that thing really. Oh, that? You don't know what you're talking about. That thing is like, they have to be the opposite. And because of that, they'll take an Opus X cigar and just, not give it a fair review. They're being biased in the sense that because of the name it's built for itself as a legendary cigar, if it doesn't conform to every point of being a perfect cigar, they just nail the fucking coffin shut, and they're like, fucking, this cigar is a piece of garbage. Or they're like, I'll give it like a 6 out of 10. Not better than any other cigar I've been smoking lately. I mean, whatever. But opinions are opinions, Then you have the third type of person who's going to give the cigar a very fair, unbiased review. Look at it as if it were any other cigar, and I can do that. I will do my best to do that. That's what I promise you. So while we have a great episode with a lot of information, we have Fuente history. We're even going to get into, a lot of people wonder, one person was saying, what the hell happened to Arturo Fuente? You know, a lot of people, Arturo Fuente Jr., some people don't even know certain things that are going on with that right now. And it's really cool stuff. We're going to get into a lot of cool stuff. Maybe a viewer email or two. And of course the cigar. But as I said, when you look at these other Opus X reviews online, ask yourself, how complete is this review really? Is the overall score really reflecting what the person has said? Two quick stories. One review, the guy gave the thing a 10 out of 10, and when I looked over the review, he mentioned almost nothing about flavor, about what it actually tastes like. Just kept going, great, fantastic, awesome, using all these adjectives, but nothing about, like, oh, well, a little nuance of this here, a little this type of flavor there, nothing. So where did the score come from? Another guy gave it a terrible score. This is my favorite. This guy, during the review, he smokes an Opus X double Corona. While the review is starting and he's lighting up, he's drinking a cup of Irish coffee with it. All right, he even says in the review, Irish coffee. All right, whatever, man. I mean, whatever word you want to use for drinking alcohol at 8 a.m. in the morning, that's up to you. Whatever. The point is that that's a powerful flavor right there. You cannot give a cigar a unbiased review, giving all the attention of the cigar to your palate, your taste buds, tongue, what have you, when you're drinking a fucking Irish coffee before you even light the thing. That's not all. This is my favorite. About half hour, 45 minutes into review, his Irish coffee's gone. Now he's drinking a fucking beer. And it's one of these fancy-ass, microbrewery beers, whatever. And the review then becomes more about the beer than the cigar, which, during the review, he keeps saying, has no flavor, I can't taste it, I don't see why it's so special, I wouldn't buy these for the price, it tastes like a bunch of wood. That's because you're fucking saturating your palate with every flavor under the sun except the cigar. Maybe the cigar really doesn't pair well with what you're drinking. And this comes to another viewer email where a guy asked me, what about pairings? And I told him, once in a while I'll suggest this or that, but I can't really do a review and a pairing because it's not one and the same. You can't review a cigar and talk about a pairing. All right? You could talk about a pairing, how good or bad the cigar goes with what you're doing, but you can't say the cigar is good or bad if you're pairing it with something because you don't know how much of an effect the pairing item is having an effect on you. You just can't do it. It's just not proper. It's not, I don't want to say I'm not orthodox as far as all my practices go, but that's just ridiculous. I mean, you're fucking drinking coffee with the thing, then you're slugging down a fucking beer, the cigar is not even halfway done, and then you start complaining how the cigar has no fucking flavor. You gotta be fucking kidding me. You got to be fucking kidding me, man. Alright, so that is a bad example, probably my best example, of a really bad Opus X review. Just awful Opus X review. Because as a cigar smoker, I have gained no information from your review whatsoever. None. None. Except probably not to drink Irish coffee with an Opus X. Just a quick look at our Fuente Opus X Perfecxion X before we light up. Great looking cigar. Great looking cigar. Forget the band. Nice color. Nice color. Really, really nice color. You can see that reddish brown in there. What they call risotto. They've given these wrappers a special name, risotto wrappers, because of that reddish brown appearance. To me, it's kind of just like, I guess like a Colorado. I mean, I don't, it almost has, I guess, they say it has like a pinkish hue, but I don't know about that. It does, however, look like a very nice wrapper. And I tell you, the cigar has a really, really intense Barney smell. One thing I like about cigars kept in cellophane is that when you take them out, you really get to smell that aroma. A lot of times cigars without cellophane, like all Cuban cigars, the aroma can dissipate over time. A lot of it depends on aging practices, etc. But we can talk a little bit about that later if we get a chance. Very, very nice cigar. Let's get to it, shall we? So, on with the review. Clean palate, ready to start. So, here we go. I have a huge clump of brand history here, but what I did basically, I was writing this giant thing. You know, I have actually 3 books, different books on Fuente stuff, and a movie, a DVD thing, and of course there's information online, although limited, because the Wikipedia on this one is really not very good. In fact, there's 2. There's a Wikipedia on the brand, which is and then there's a Wikipedia on the Opus itself, which is terrible, because all it does is say like 2 sentences and then give you a bunch of shapes, and even the shapes aren't complete. Basically what I decided to do, because as I was writing, this thing could have turned into a book of its own, I broke it into a timeline format. So I'll basically give a date so you can approximate where we are, and then give you some information. And of course here and there I'll break into a little thing depending on how relevant the information is to what we're doing. But I guarantee you it is interesting, especially if you don't know a lot about Fuente. Nice draw, some firmness to it. Bit of a sour note, you know, almost a little lemony, orange peel type thing, a little tiny bit bitter, tiny bit. Woody, spices, stuff like, you know, nutmeggy, allspice type things going on. Grammy, very grammy, some honey-esque type notes. A lot of different spices going on at the beginning, which are more of a nasal thing. And then the filler on the tongue itself is a tiny bit, I don't want to say, it's really not bitter. It's on the verge, but it's very citrusy. Interesting. Interesting. Okay, let's light her up. You know, I gotta say, this cigar came out almost 20 years ago. So you have to look also at when the cigar came out, why it was such a big fucking deal. There's other reasons it's a big deal too, which we'll talk about. But, you know, when this cigar came out, it was the cigar that every other company wanted to be producing. I like the pre-draw. It's got a lot. It's like a spice cabinet, man. It's got a lot of different little things going on. Some peppery spice coming on now, some actual spiciness. You know, I hate the 2 terms spice and spicy because they get mixed up, you know. I try to, spices, when I talk about spices, I mean like spices, and then I talk about spiciness. This cigar is both. It's really good to let Opus X cigars sit a while too in your humidor. It's another problem. You know, get rid of that. I always put the match there and have to stare at it the whole fucking time. Some instant sweetness coming on the tip of the tongue. Strong, spicy, woody, a lot of cedar and some citrus, a tiny bit bitter almost. But some sweetness too. Alright, bitterness is starting to subside already and turning into a little more of a sweet note. Wow. Spicy, like I just said, a lot of spices, a lot of cedar, a lot of wood. Not particularly earthy. Grammy, Grammy with that sweetness is like honey. It's honey-esque. Very nice. Very nice so far. That initial bitterness reminded me a lot of añejo type flavor, which, by the way, the filler is actually the same shit used for the añejo. It's only the wrapper that's really different. But that is quickly subsiding, and now I'm getting a very Grammy, honey-esque, spicy flavor with a lot of cedar. That's nice. That's really nice. You know, I just blew some through the nose. It's floral, but it's also got something else in there. I'll try to pinpoint it later. I don't really know. It's a different type of floral. A few puffs and I'm already feeling it. This is a strong cigar. It always has been. It's a very strong cigar. Haha. That reminds me of another thing. That guy with the coffee and the beer. He's fucking smoking the double Corona. He's down. He's at the last third mark, and he's going, this cigar has no power to it. I don't understand why. You know, I'm not feeling anything. This is supposed to be a strong cigar. I'm not getting any effect. So beside no flavor, now it has no power. Maybe it's because you're drunk, dude. You know, maybe you just had an Irish coffee and now you're drinking a fucking beer and you're smoking this cigar. You don't feel anything. Yeah, okay. You don't feel anything. Personally, there's no getting around it. This is one of the strongest Dominican cigars on the fucking market. Period. You know, the only thing that really comes close is like, you know, Lito Gomez LG series. You know, there are a few strong ones. Burn is nice. I was worried a bit. It's very jagged. You know, but it's okay. It's not canoeing or anything. For a minute there, I started seeing this thing, but I just didn't touch it. Just left it alone, and it's evening out. We have a very nice, you know, nice gray, light gray ash forming. This is going to be fun smoking this because the headier I get, the crazier I get. So it's good for you guys. Well, a bit of ammonia right there. I was just chewing on the head there as I was taking a pull, and I got a bit of an ammonia type note. All right, let's let it sit. This is, by the way, I mentioned before, from a 2011 batch, so it's been sitting for 2.5 years maybe, let's say. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's aged 2.5 years. It's been in cellophane the whole time, in a tin, which was also in cellophane. So the aging process is a lot slower. However, like I said, we're going to talk about aging soon. We're not going to have time in this episode, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.